69 of Board Game Blitz, a podcast about all things board games that you can listen to in less time than it takes to get your kid to stop singing that one song. You know the one I'm talking about. Board Game Blitz is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. This week, we're talking about kids' games. First, we discuss a few games we've played recently: Draw the Line, Soundbox, Dexterity Jane, Echoes the Microchip, and Jekyll vs. Hyde. Then we talk about board games made for kids that we also love. And now, here are your hosts,
Ambie
and Crystal.
Recently, I got a few review copies of party games, and I got to play them all. So the three games are Draw the Line, Dexterity Jane, and Soundbox. Draw the Line is a party game that's like a mix between Pictionary and Connect the Dots. It was published in 2022, designed by Jay Cormier and Chase Disher, published by Synapses Games. In Draw the Line, it's a team game where each team is two people. So one person has a word that they're trying to get the other person to guess, and then each person has like this grid of icons, and then you're like making a connected dot picture of the drawing that you're trying to get them to guess, and then each icon has a different icon, so you act out the icon and get your teammate to figure out the dots and then connect the dots. And so like they make a connect the dot picture based on what you're acting out. So they make the connect the dot picture that you had made, and then they try to guess what the word is. I don't know if that makes sense, but you can look up pictures. So it's like connect the dots with charades. And then to win, you have to win 3 times. And as you win, like the grid gets harder. So like on the third grid, there's spaces missing in the grid. So like when you make your connect the dot line, there's spaces missing, and you have to kind of like use the new grid and figure out a good way to draw the image to make it still easy for the person to see the next dot. Because like when they're doing charades, it's kind of hard to see what they're charading and like find the dot. Like even if you know what they're charading, you're looking for the dot. Like where is it? So it's kind of hard, and it's hard to come up with the line art to show the image. Like you're trying to do a tree, but it has to be like a blocky thing because it's like a connect the dots in a grid. But somehow it still works. So the items that you have to draw, using the connect the dots, I assume, are relatively simple items. Yeah, they're relatively simple things. So like a tree, a fish, or something. And I think it has a clue or like a category. If you guess wrong once, then the person can tell you the category of the thing.
Oh, okay.
And so it has that as a clue. So I thought it was fun. Toby didn't like it because he doesn't like dry erase, and I think he didn't like the drawing and acting combination thing. But it was kind of fun and surprisingly hard. Well, I guess not surprisingly. It sounds like it's going to be hard, and it is hard.
I don't want to interrupt you, but what do you mean Toby doesn't like dry erase? That's it. Like you said that so nonchalantly, and he doesn't like dry erase, but I've never. That doesn't. Am I the only one who? Like, he doesn't like messy, the feeling of it, or like
it's messy, and he doesn't like using it, I guess so.
Huh. Okay. Yeah. I learn something new about Toby every day.
We don't tend to keep dry erase games. He's fine playing other people's copies, but not keeping them.
Man, and there's some really good games that utilize dry erase.
I know, yeah. Like just one. We like playing that, but we don't own it.
Wow, okay. Yeah, like in Fiverr Find-In is really good too.
But anyways, that was Draw the Line. Charades Connect the Dots. Another one is Dexterity Jane, published in 2021 by Sit Down. So Dexterity Jane is a kind of real-time dexterity-ish game. So there's these cards that have different hand pictures on them with their different fingers folded down, and you're going to look at all the cards on the table and then fold down your fingers based on what fingers are folded down. But like if there's 2 of the same finger folded down, then it cancels out.
Oh, so this is another bunny moose
yes,
moose
it's like a simpler bunny moose moose.
Okay.
But each round, one more card comes out. So in the first round, there's only 1 card out, so you only like fold down 1 finger. But then second round, 2 cards, and you get more points for each round too. It gets pretty hard when all the cards come out and they cancel each other out. Oh, there's also another card that's like an open hand, and so that cancels out all of the fingers. And there's also left and right hands, so it's like you're looking, is this the index finger of the left hand or the right hand? And you have to like look at all of them. And at one time we were playing, and I think it would all ended up canceling them. Everything like canceled each other out, so it was just like open hands. And someone just looked at it and just like did it because they're like, okay, I just think it's gonna be open hand.
They were just like, you know what? We're going to take a shot in the dark here.
Yeah, and then they got it. So that's a quick, if you like the idea of bunny moose moose, which I've talked about before in the podcast, but like want a simpler one that's slightly easier to keep track of, then Dexterity Jane is fun. There's also like another mode where you're shooting people and taking their points, but we didn't play that mode. That one's more complicated. And then the last party game that we played is Soundbox, published in 2022 by Horrible Guild. Soundbox is a party game where you're making sounds. So this is a cooperative party game. There's different words of different sounds like guitar solo or car crash or something. And each person gets a word in secret, and one person is the guesser, and they have their eyes closed. After they look at the words, they have their eyes closed, and then everyone simultaneously makes their sound for 13 seconds, and then the person who's guessing has to guess all of the sounds. And it is very hilarious.
They sent me a copy of this one too, Ambie, and I haven't had a chance to play it yet, but I'm so looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's so hard to like remember all the sounds because you're guessing one at a time, codename style. So like if you mess up, then you don't get any more guesses, and you get negative points for everything you didn't guess. So you want to get the one you were sure about first. And sometimes you think you're sure and then you're completely wrong. But like you're like, okay, I heard the police siren, so there's that, and then it's like, oh shoot, what was the other one? It was something like waka wah 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 or like something, but then what was that? And then you kind of misremember, and then you have no idea what's going on. And then in higher player count games, there's also the recorder, which is another role that gets added, and that person just closes their eyes and listens to the sound and then keeps their eyes closed when the guesser is guessing and just tries to replay the sound, all the sounds. So theoretically that should help, but when we played it, it didn't actually help much because the recorder also forgot. Or like they would replay it, but then it like still wouldn't be able to tell what the sound was because like they were playing it and not really knowing, they don't remember what the words are, so like they're just replaying what they heard, which might not be the same as the sound. Right. It's like
what one person thinks a horn sounds like might be very different from what someone else thinks it sounds like.
Yeah. And if you're not thinking, oh, that was a horn sound, you'll be like, okay, that was a sound. Like, okay, I'm gonna try to do that. So Soundbox is hilarious fun, and it's very difficult to win. We haven't won yet, but maybe sometime.
This sounds like one that adults would maybe particularly enjoy if they were the type of adults who partook in adult beverages at times. This sounds like one of those games.
It also has like two sides of the cards. One is like family friendly, and then one is like less family friendly. So if you want to play with your family and like make sure it's all family friendly sounds, you can go to that side of the card, but otherwise you can just pick randomly.
How not family friendly does the other side of the cards get?
I don't think anything was like super not family.
Nothing lewd or anything.
It might have had like things like scary sounds and stuff, like a chainsaw or like
okay like but not like dirty stuff.
No, I don't think we saw any yet.
Okay. Because that would make things interesting for sure. Real quick, I'm going to talk about a game that Ambie has already discussed previously on the podcast back in episode 161, but I got a review copy of Echoes, the Microchip recently. The Echoes series is kind of a puzzle-solving series akin to escape room board games, but it is all based on sound, and you use a special app to scan the cards that are in the game and hear story, sound effects, and other things from them. So this was designed by Matthew Dunstan and Dave Neal and published by Ravensburger in 2021. Ambie, what were your thoughts on the Echoes games in general, if for people who didn't get to hear that episode?
I like them a lot. They're mostly story. It's just like putting things in order, and so I just like listening to the story and then like putting it in order, and then I get the whole story. That's basically what the game is, if you like story type games.
Right. Yeah, there isn't, as far as like puzzle solving goes, this isn't really puzzle solving. It's you're scanning different pieces of a story and trying to kind of put them in order based on what you're hearing, and it isn't, you know, completely obvious all the time. They have a lot of things that like could go with one another, and you have to keep scanning. I didn't think I was going to dislike this. I like pretty much everything Ravensburger puts out of this ilk, but this surprised me in how much I really liked it, and now I want to get the other two Echoes games. Yeah, like it was really enjoyable to listen to the story and piece everything together, and then to hear what the whole story was at the end of it, because I'm being vague because obviously I don't want to spoil this, but yeah, like you kind of uncover the mystery as you go, and you're not sure what's happening, and then when you find out what's happening, you're like, oh my gosh, this is you know, this is
Yeah,
cool.
because like
So,
after you piece together some pieces, then it like plays more audio that wasn't in the original audio bits.
Yeah.
After you complete it, then it like plays the whole audio with the deleted parts that you didn't hear before. So it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
and it's really fascinating. At least the Microchip. Like I said, I haven't played the other two yet, but I am planning to seek those out. I really liked it. I would highly recommend this if it sounds like anything you might enjoy. And then I also got another review copy recently of a 2-player trick-taking game called Jekyll versus Hyde, published by Mandu Games, designed by Gionil. And I have to give a shout out to the artist here because it's Vincent Dutrait. And for anyone who knows Vincent Dutrait's work, holy moly, the artwork in this game is gorgeous. Like, it's real pretty. I love trick-taking games. I've mentioned that on the show many times, but I have not played a lot of 2-player trick-taking games. Those are starting to become a little bit more common. The one that I think is most well known in the hobby board game sphere is Fox in the Forest, which I've still never played. So I actually don't have that as a point of reference. But Jekyll and Hyde is a 2-player game where one player is Dr. Jekyll and one player is Mr. Hyde, and there is a board with a track on it, and Mr. Hyde is attempting to get the counter on the track all the way to the end, and Dr. Jekyll is just trying to prevent that from happening. The way the track gets advanced is after every round, the difference in tricks taken between player 1 and player 2, it doesn't matter who is who, the difference in the number of tricks advances the counter. So Dr. Jekyll is trying to keep things balanced. He's trying to make sure that each player wins around the same number of tricks, whereas Mr. Hyde is trying to either win all of the tricks or win none of the tricks, basically. And there are 3 different suits in the game, and the suits are ranked differently depending on when they come out each round. So the colors may be stronger or weaker depending on when they are first played in a round. And there are these special cards that when they come out, depending on the color of the other card that was played against them, they will trigger special potion powers that can do things like you get to take a trick from your opponent, or you have to swap cards with a couple of cards from your hand with the other player. It makes it really interesting because you very much have to be aware of what's happening in the moment and be able to adjust on the fly. And I really love that because it feels very different from other trick-taking games. Like when I was growing up playing hearts or spades or things like that, generally you get your whole big old hand of cards and you kind of already know what you're going to do with it. Like you have a good idea of how many tricks you're going to take and which cards you're going to play and when you're going to play them. In a game like this, you can't have that foresight. It's just not possible. You really have to be able to adjust and go along with whatever's happening. And it's really fascinating. The theme does not come through super strong, but I think, you know, that's probably not surprising since it is a trick-taking game, but I still like the theme. I think it's an interesting, you know, it's a struggle between the 2 parts of one human as per the story of Jekyll and Hyde. It's really quite neat, and it comes in a small box. And if you're somebody who likes trick-taking games like me, but you don't always have 4 or more people to play them with, this is definitely one to take a look at. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I'm excited to play it more in the future. Oh, and I have to give, there's a component, like this box is small, like very small, and the tracker for the counter, I'm going to show Ambie on video, but it is this like really gorgeous metal piece of Dr. Jekyll wearing a top hat, and it's metal and it's heavy. Like it's a gorgeous little figurine. Wow, and it shocked me when I like pulled it out of the box. I was like, they didn't have to include this in there, and it really feels kind of nice. So, you know, I'm sure that they loved it when they put it in here, and I want to give them credit for that. Like they didn't have to put in a piece this nice, but they did. So that is Jekyll versus Hyde from Mandu Games. Ambie, we've talked about a lot of different categories of board games over the past 6.5 years, but there is one category we haven't touched on a ton, and I feel like as time progresses, we're probably going to start talking about them more and more, at least from your side of things, and that's kids' games.
Yep, children's games. I've got some kids now.
You sure do, and they're getting to the age where they're actually kind of interested in games.
Yeah.
They're getting way more interested all the time, it seems, from what you've been telling me.
Although they're still not really playing the children's games as much. I have a bunch of children's games for them, and then they're like, I want to play the 18XX. And they're like, I want to play this review new copy you just got that's not a children's game. I'm like, okay.
That's so cute though that they want to like do stuff with mom. And we did earlier this year, we did an episode about kids games for adults, like games that are marketed as kids games that we think are really fun to play even if there are no kids present. But today we're going to talk about some of our favorite games for kids, but I guess in Ambie's case, she has a little bit more perspective on what kids might actually like since she has kids. For me, it's going to be things that I think are some of the most kid-friendly that I enjoy, and also some games that I have played with kids before.
And one thing that's weird about children's games in general is that children is a big age range.
It really is. It's huge.
Yeah, and like the development is so big. Like, so like a 2-year-old versus a 3-year-old versus a 4-year-old, it's gonna be completely different games. So
well, and even a 4-year-old versus a different 4-year-old versus a different 4-year-old, it's still all very different. And I think, you know, it's definitely important for parents to kind of gauge where their kids are at and what their kids are interested in. And I think we as hobby gamers sometimes really want, like, when we do have kids, I know of many people who have been like, yay, more people for my game group. But it's like, well, you can't really just like force that on them. Because as any of us who were a kid know, and that's everyone, obviously, I know if my dad really wanted me to do something, I sometimes like didn't want to just because he wanted me to. And I think that's a universal thing, but I'm not quite sure why.
Yeah, at some point.
Right, like not really my entire childhood.
But like as they get older and they want to be more independent, they stop wanting to do things that you really want them to do. So yeah. But I did do a top 10 list of children's games over on One Pip Wonders YouTube channel. So Jonna has older kids, so I had I still have toddlers, and so my top 10 list was mostly like toddler games, and then hers were like older games, like going into family games that like adults play too. So that kind of covered a bunch of age ranges of children's games. So you can go check that out if you're interested in like specific games. But yeah, like what have you found, or what do you think, Crystal, makes a good kids game?
I think there's a lot of factors to consider. How heavy the rules are is a really big point of consideration, especially because like we talk about family games and kids games. To me, a family game is something that a kid can play, but possibly wouldn't be able to learn on their own or play on their own without the help of an adult, like for some reason. Whereas a pure kids game to me feels like something that like a kid of a certain age should be able to go to the shelf, pull it off, and play it by themselves or with their friends without the help of adults. So the rules have to be fairly simple, especially depending on their age, and that needs to be relatively short, I would say, because kids' attention spans kids don't want to sit down and play a 2-hour game, obviously. Like, that's not gonna happen. And I think, honestly, I think the packaging and the components can play a big factor in a kid's game as well, because you want the kid to be engaged. So bright colors or fun pieces or things like that, I would imagine, like when I was a kid, I loved Pretty Pretty Princess. I really loved Pretty Pretty Princess. And that is barely a game. You literally are I don't remember if it's a spinner or a die, but you're literally moving around a circle. And just whenever you land on a thing, you put that piece of jewelry on, like the ring or the necklace or the earrings, and at the end, you can get the crown. There's no game there, but because the components were so fun, I got to put on all this fake plastic jewelry. I loved that game. And so, from my point of view, the games with fun components are the ones that I gravitated toward. And so I imagine it's similar for other kids as well.
Yeah, and there are a lot of new children's games coming out that I've seen. And I'm excited that I have an excuse to get them now, although I still have too many children's games. I shouldn't get any more, but they have really nice art and really cool components and really cool themes. Oh, these are so cool.
Yeah, they kids games have really come, in my estimation, a long way, because you can kind of phone it in with a kids game. You can make something not as good and it will still work for many kids. And that's not to say the game is bad, but like some of the games that are coming out now are still very kid friendly, but just way more interesting.
Yeah. And I think like designing, or we're getting a little off topic, but like,
oh, you know what? Go for it.
It seems like for designers, they can design kids games and just like do unique things that might not work with an adult's game, but like they can just be more creative with kids games because they have like all these cool, unique things in kids games.
And it's interesting because like, we'll have to mention Haba at some point, so I might as well just do it now. Haba is really good at making kids games. They have a ton that are really awesome. And something like Dragon's Breath, which if you're not familiar with it, there's these plastic rings that get stacked up in the middle of the board, and then there's gems that are inside of those plastic rings. I've never actually played the game, I've just seen it, but like I know when you take the plastic rings off, you're trying to either get the gems to fall or not get them to fall. But what's interesting is a component like that, this tower of rings with stuff inside of it, that could be utilized in an adult board game easily. But like you see that kind of stuff more in children's games. You don't see quite as quirky of mechanics like that typically in adult games.
Yeah. And another Haba game that I just got is Forest Friends, which is for 2-year-olds, but it's like a memory game, but it has this 3D cardboard, you like put these cardboard pieces up in the box and then you're peeping through the hole to look for the little animals.
That's so cool.
So it's pretty fun. I mean, we haven't played it yet, but like we haven't played by the rules, but it's fun. Like my kids like setting it up and playing with the components like they do with other games.
Something that I've seen in a lot of kids games that I think tends to be pretty universally liked is dexterity elements. You know, especially kids of a certain age are still learning hand-eye coordination and other dexterous movements. And so simple tasks can be more difficult for a kid, which can make the game more interesting. But I've also seen, I know we're not talking about kids games for adults, but like Dancing Eggs is another game from Haba where there are these wooden eggs, or no, one's wood, all the rest are rubber. They're rubber eggs, and you roll a die and it tells you where to put the egg, and it's somewhere on your body, like under your arm or between your knees or like under your chin, and you have to hold it there. And then if a certain thing gets rolled, everyone has to like run around the table. And so you're like, as a kid, you're motoring, right? You're like, I'm good, I got my eggs, I'm whatever. And me as an adult trying to run with an egg between my knees, it's not gonna happen. And so it kind of levels the playing field in a really interesting way when you throw, now there are some dexterity things that adults are gonna be way better at, obviously, but there are some like that where it's just funny to watch adults try and play against kids in a game like that.
Yeah, another dexterity game that levels out for kids is Gulo Gulo. It was re-implemented as Pharaoh's Gulo Gulo, I think. I don't know if both versions are out of print. I don't know. I know like the original was out of print for a while, but you're supposed to like grab colored eggs from this basket in the middle. And so the eggs are kind of small. So like having little kid hands makes it easier to grab the eggs than like big adult fingers, right? So even though like adults are generally better at dexterity, kids can actually fit in there.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I have a game that you and I both like that never gets talked about anywhere else that I wanted to mention. Igloo Pop, the one where you've got little plastic igloos with beads in them and you have to shake them and guess how many are in there. And that, like, that's great for a kid. Like, let them listen to the little things shaking around and guess how many are in there. Like, that's easy, I would think. And we're, you know, that game, it can be very, very frustrating in the best way because you're like, oh yeah, there's definitely like 7 beads in here. And then you put it down and whatever, and it's like 3. And you're like, wait, no way, that's not possible.
Yeah, kids have better hearing than adults, so.
They do. That's true. So, like, that's science.
Yeah. My kids aren't old enough for Igloo Pop yet, though. They played with the pieces, but not old enough to
actually know what to do with them. Yeah. I've also played some light card games with kids, things like Best Treehouse Ever. This was actually kind of one of the more recent games that I played with kids, and these were not kids that I was related to. It was a friend of mine, his son and daughter. And I had gone over to his house and he was running out to pick up pizza. And so we were playing Best Treehouse Ever. And it was kind of a lesson in, I don't hang out with kids that often, right? Like I don't. And I am a rule follower in games. I like to follow the rules, and kids are not always going to follow or potentially even understand the rules.
Yeah.
And so when we were playing, I noticed that the kids were not placing things in their treehouse probably the way the rules intended them to. And I was like, do I say something? And I was like, no, I don't. They're having fun. We're still playing the game. Like, we can count up the scores at the end if we want, but really, I think, especially from a kid's point of view, the purpose of a game is potentially different than what an adult might come into a game expecting. Some adults are very much about the competition and trying to win. And there are kids who are very competitive as well, but I would say most of the time when kids pull a game off a shelf, it's because they want to be entertained. And so the rules are not necessarily as important. And so it was nice for me to take a step back mentally and just be like, Crystal, we do not have to follow the rules. It is okay. Just build your treehouse.
Yeah. And then if you like try to follow the rules and make them follow the rules, then they won't like it as much.
Right. Like that's not fun for anybody. And now you just seem like a jerk.
Yeah.
And I do get there's value in eventually teaching a kid how to follow rules. But in an instance like this, they weren't deliberately breaking rules. They were just playing the game the way they thought it should be played, basically.
Yeah. Big children's game that like I always talk about is the first toddler game is Go Away Monster. And that one, like everyone that I've played with, every kid has like a different way of handling the monster in that. You're supposed to like say go away monster. I think even in the rules it says like you can either throw it across the room or put it back in the box or do whatever you want like with the monster. So it leaves it open to do whatever you want with the monster after you say go away monster. But like my kids now were tucking it in the bed in their room. But they say go away monster and then put it in bed.
Oh gosh.
Which is funny. So
that's adorable.
Like, yeah, that's what they like. And then also like kids tend to want specific items in their room, like they want the orange bed or like green bed or something. So like they end up trading, and that's not in the rules either, but like they really want that bed. So kind of teaches other stuff even if it's not in the rules.
That's cute. And there are some games that are made kind of for kids who are a little bit older. A good example of that would be My Little Scythe, which was designed by a dad and his daughter who they wanted to play Scythe together, but the daughter was far too young for a game that complex. And so they literally designed their own version of Scythe themed kind of around My Little Ponies, and then it was so good that Stonemaier Games basically bought the, got the design from them legally, not like in a bad way, and made My Little Scythe, which is not My Little Pony licensed or themed technically.
I think the original game was My Little Pony, but then like
getting licensing rights to stuff is tough. And My Little Scythe is really fun. Like I really enjoy that game, and so I think it's neat. And then there's another game that we wanted to talk about, CoraQuest, which currently is on Kickstarter again with its new expansion.
So that was also designed by a father-daughter duo that we know.
Yeah, so Dan Hughes and Cora.
Yeah. I actually have CoraQuest. You backed CoraQuest too, right?
I did back CoraQuest, and I mailed it directly to my sister's house. I don't know if my nephews have played it yet. Like, the older nephew is definitely old enough for it, but the younger one is still 3, so I think it's probably... And so my assumption is it'll sit on the shelf for probably a couple more years, and then hopefully they'll pull it off the shelf at some point. Yeah,
my kids aren't old enough yet because they're 3, but I backed the expansion too. And the expansion adds a campaign, which is exciting. I like campaigns, but yeah, hopefully my kids like that. I think one thing, CoraQuest is shorter adventures. So like other campaign games, I played Stuffed Fables a while ago with my friend's kid, and that one, the theme was cool for kids. It was like stuffed animals, and then there was like story and you're going adventuring, and the mechanics were fun for our kids' friend, but then it was just too long because like one chapter took a couple of hours, and so she was just tired and less than halfway through tired of it. So like you mentioned before, it needs to be relatively short. So I think like the CoraQuest adventures are short, and they're like made by a kid for kids, so it's gonna be like something that a kid will want to play too.
And honestly, like Dan and Cora had been doing segments on YouTube together for so many years, and it's really neat. It was cool. It's neat to see how much Cora has grown up, because she was so tiny when they started making videos together, and now she's a game designer. Like, and she's definitely still a kid, like, but she... And I love, like, Dan will post pictures of, like, when something successful happens for CoraQuest, they'll go out and get, like, an ice cream sundae together, and it's so cute. Those are the types of stories that I love in board games that you don't get to hear about, I think, in other hobbies or like as much. Like board games kind of just engender this cool collaborative nature, and like people who play board games want to make board games a lot of the time, and it's just really neat.
Yeah, and they can make them. That's
yeah,
cool.
You can. Like anybody can design a board game. No one's stopping you. Like if you want to design a video game, you got to learn stuff, right? You got to learn how to code and some other things if you want to make a video game. But if you want to make a board game, you can sit down with some paper and pencils and just do it.
Yeah. And that's another thing, like going back to kids games, like I think kids like designing games too. Like they like creating things. They have imaginations. I remember as a kid, like I played HeroQuest and there was like custom campaign makers or custom adventures, and I would like make a little custom adventure thing. So games that have that ability, which CoraQuest also has that, you can make your own heroes and stuff. But yeah, so like games that encourage that creativity are really good for kids.
Absolutely. Well, we would love to hear from you all what your favorite kids games are, or what your kids' favorite games are. So hit us up on social media or our Discord or our Board Game Geek Guild and let us know what your favorite kids games are.
And that's it for this week's Board Game Blitz. Visit our website, boardgameblitz.com, for video blog content, as well as to get links to all our social media pages. This episode was sponsored by Grey Fox Games, coming soon from the designer of Arcana Rising. The Bazaars of Ubar is a fantastical engine-building game where players will draft trade tiles from the marketplace where the costs shift like the sands. And don't forget that Blitzketeers get 20% off non-exclusive items at greyfoxgames.com by using the code GFGBLitz2022 at checkout. Join the Blitzketeer community on Discord for game nights, discussions, and more by following the link in the show notes. Support our show by leaving us a rating and review on iTunes or Spotify. And if you want behind-the-scenes access and an invite to our private Slack channel, visit patreon.com/boardgameblitz. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Morrow. Technical support provided by Toby Mount. Until next time, whoa, kids game of mine. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And I'll go over them one by one because that's how I do reviews of games. I played Stuffed Fables a while ago with a kid's friend. I mean, a friend's kid. Whoa, kid game. Whoops, kids.
Then we talk about board games that make... Oh gosh, I got so proud of myself for adding in the other thing that I was like, yay! And I stopped reading.